Oh, you're calling roll.
Well, I'm starting the webinar.
Oh, okay. I heard my name. So.
Okay. Everything is ready to begin whenever you're ready, Kevin.
Okay. Well, welcome. This is February 2nd. Yes, it is Groundhog Day in 2021. This is the meeting of the CB6 newly named, I can't say that for another meeting, I did it last time, newly named Environment and Parks Committee. My name is Kevin O'Keefe and I am the chair of this committee. This meeting is called to order at 7:03 p.m. Eastern Time. Tonight we are joined by Community Associate Brendan Berth. Members of the public, you can raise any questions or comments that you have through the Q&A feature on Zoom. If there is time following the committee's discussion, we will field questions from the public. Marty Barrett steps up and has volunteered to take minutes for tonight. We all thank you, Marty. Anytime. Are you doing this for the first time or all good?
I was here last month and the month before, but okay.
We will now take attendance by roll call. Brendan will conduct said roll call.
Committee members, I will call your name and you will unmute yourselves. When your name is called, please say present. I will announce if there is quorum. Kevin O'Keefe.
Here.
Jean D'Onofrio.
Here.
Marty Barrett.
Present.
Matt Bondi.
Here.
Paige is not here. Anton Malner.
Here.
Raj Nayar.
Present.
Reshma Patel.
Here.
Mark Thompson.
Here.
Gary Papush. Okay, I do see Gary here, so I am counting him as present. And Dean Stephanides.
Here.
Okay, we have quorum.
Wonderful. Now the agenda for tonight's meeting was distributed ahead of time by the board office and is reflected on your screen. If there is no objection, we will adopt the agenda. Members of the committee, if you object to adopting the agenda, you may raise your hand through Zoom. Brendan, do we see any? I don't.
Nope.
Seeing no objections, the agenda for tonight's meeting is adopted. Now, the minutes from the January 5th meeting were distributed ahead of time by the board office. If there is no objection, we will adopt those minutes as they were drafted. Members of the committee, if you object to adopting the minutes, you may raise your hand through Zoom. Hat tip to Reshma for doing those minutes, appreciate it. No one's objecting. Seeing no objections, the minutes from the January 5th meeting are adopted. They will soon be available on, you guessed it, the CB6 website. Now, in order to conduct an efficient meeting, we do need to observe a few ground rules. Number one, no one may speak until granted the floor. Two, committee members, if you have a question about committee business or wish to make a motion, please raise your hand through Zoom. If you click the participants icon, the participants panel should appear magically and you should find the raise hand function right there. If you still have technical difficulty, you may click the chat icon and relay your difficulty. Now, the chat function should never be used for committee business, big no-no, or questions about agenda topics. All such remarks should be made on the record by raising your hand through, yes, Zoom. Chat should only be used to alert us to any technical difficulties you are having or to state in writing information, like an email address, that was already stated aloud on the record during the meeting. This is number 4. When a committee member is given the floor to speak, I will identify you and you can unmute yourself so that you will be unmuzzled. Number 5, we are required by executive order to create a verbatim transcript of the meeting. So please keep your questions and comments succinct and germane to discussion. Unless they're really great, then I'll let you go. Okay, agenda item number 1, discussion of open spaces unavailable for the public, a resounding topic. Now, this committee is committed to identifying an opening for more hours outdoor space and green space in the district. Now, some of those inquiries are about spaces not regarded as public. For example, Gramercy Park traditionally is only open 1 hour a year to the public to hear Christmas carols on Christmas Eve from 6 to 7 p.m. Now, access to the park was supposedly given only to landowners around the park if they paid a fair share of property taxes. However, an independent 2018 examination of properties that are not granted this access but are near the park found that they essentially pay the same amount of taxes than those who get access to the park. Now, one of the 3 reporters on that WNYC Gothamist investigation recently informed me that after the mayor learned of the arrangement between Gramercy Park and the city, that the arrangement should be revisited. That's the mayor's word. The reporter added that there are no signs that the mayor has revisited this arrangement. So to ask about additional Gramercy Park hours for the public, we asked Arlene Harrison, the esteemed president of the Gramercy Park Block Association, to join us at tonight's meeting. She then declined. She said to now address any inquiries to the trustees of Gramercy Park. Arlene, we will do so. We continue our look into other spaces, many of them public. On that public side, we inquired to MTA Bridges and Tunnels about their green space on the east side of First Avenue between 36th and 37th Streets that has been closed to the public for years. This is the response that we received, the committee received in writing from MTA Bridges and Tunnels. In regard to the subject triangular parcel on the northwest corner of First Avenue and 36th Street, abutting the south retaining wall of the QMT entrance plaza and South Tube, please note that any public access or use would pose significant concerns and is therefore not a consideration for us. While the area may look like a simple patch of green, there's key infrastructure therein, in addition to access issues related to security, maintenance, safety, and emergency response. Also at issue is the structural stability of the retaining wall, as well as access to critical toll collection equipment and generator. Thank you for your interest, and I hope the information I have shared is helpful in understanding our position. So that would be a no. Among the other public spaces that we're investigating are the United Nations Garden, obviously on First Avenue, just north of the United Nations. Now, last month at the full community board meeting, I asked then incoming Majority Leader Schumer about his take on more open space in the district. He said in part, quote, "We need more green space in New York, and part of our infrastructure bill is very green. It includes a provision to give dollars to localities to help create more green space. So you'll have to get the work done in New York City by your city government, but there will be federal dollars there to help." Nice to hear. In this spirit, we were intrigued by talk from the Municipal Art Society, MPS, about the need for a public realm czar. This has also been supported by the Borough President's Office and CB5, among others. Now, Paris and Boston are among the cities that have turned to this need. To address this, we will later hear tonight from MPS Director of Advocacy. But first, in the same light, we want to give the floor to the Kips Bay Alliance, PS 116 and PS 281, about possible new open space and compost space in and around St. Martin Park. We should have David, Erica, and Sandy McKee to present for 5 minutes, and Brendan will joyfully keep that time.
And I did prepare a couple slides. I don't know if I can share my screen.
Just give me a moment.
And we won't start the clock yet.
Thank you. Thank you. Or I could just start talking anyway. What we're proposing is to have an open street as part of the DOT's open street system on East 36th Street from First Avenue to what's called Tunnel Approach Road. We did apply for this back in May, but we now have a lot more support for some of the community members who are going to speak after me. But this space is adjacent to the park. It has excellent access to the park and is basically not a very heavily used street. Brendan, can I share yet or not yet?
Yep, you should be able to share.
Okay. So this is the park. You can see the space that was just mentioned, which is over top of the tunnel. And then also part of the park area that is not accessible is facing First Avenue between 36th and 35th, which I think the committee is going to address as well. Let me see if I can. So this is the street in question. It's actually a lovely street. It has trees, it's well shaded, it's perfect for the summertime. Currently there is a storage space on the street, but we're hoping that will be finished soon. We've been in touch with the DDC people who are, that people are doing the work for the DDC, and we think we can work with them to get that space back. There is it from the other side. And this is just a reminder of what the Open Street program is. It's open from 8 till 8 every day. It means that unfortunately cars can still go through and still park, but it is basically closed to through traffic, which in this particular street, there's very little through traffic. This is an example of a street that's been very successful. This is Berry Street in Brooklyn, and you can see they still have parking here, but you can see that it's a pretty successful use of the street. Lots of people there, lots of community support for the street. This is Avenue B, which has also been considered very successful. You can see the barricades that the cars have to go around them, and they've been decorated by the local community groups. We are also looking for a space to do composting, and we can do this with the Lower East Side Ecology Center. And we have someone from the center here if there are any questions about how that could work. But we'd like to find space in St. Barton's to do that. And we have lined up some volunteers who would be very interested in the program. And I'll hand it over to our next speaker.
Sandy, do you want me to jump in?
Yes, please. Is that David?
Yeah, this is.
Great.
Nice to meet you all. So I'm a parent of students at the River School as well as at School of the Future. I'm also the lead of the Green Team at the River School. And we also have Erica, I believe, is also on this call, who represents PS 116. And our goal is really to have, certainly more green space. Have you guys are trying to address that in our area, but in regard to the Open Street program, we are aware that there will be a closure of the asphalt field, as we call it, that's going to be re-turfed. And while that's happening, it's really critical for us to have some blacktop space for kids to be able to ride bicycles and be able to move around. So not only during the construction, but post-construction, blacktop spaces at a premium, at least in a safe environment. There's some racket sports, there's cycling. The karate programs have been using that during COVID in order to be able to do safe exercise and be able to gather safely. And so the two schools have kind of come together and said, wherever we can grab some space would be great. And this seems to be an ideal space. To reiterate, one of the things that Sandy said is it does seem to be a very low traffic block, with the exception of it's used by Fresh Direct deliveries. But that's hopefully something that we can work around. Sandy, did I miss anything?
No, I think that covers it. And we do have an application into the DOT. I understand that the program is evolving, so we're not quite sure what's the next step, but we're really hoping we put together a letter where we're hoping we can get support from CB6 for this particular closure.
And I would just throw in one additional thing, Sandy, and that is that, you know, we have actually gotten together as a group in the community, and there's huge support for this. So as from a parent standpoint, there's a ton of support in being able to help maintain it and make it a pleasurable experience. And then, of course, you know, Alliance for Kips Bay and other such groups are interested in supporting it as well.
And we also, not to forget, we are interested in putting in a little free library in St. Martin's, which Mark, I'm sure, can help us. And also, we're definitely interested in composting, because currently the only composting in our area is at Stuyvesant Town. And we need people to come and bring their compost to make it successful. So we'll be following that up with some more information, which we can issue through CB6, I guess, and to anyone who's interested. Or if anyone does have questions, Leah is at the meeting as well.
Thank
Going
you.
under 5 minutes?
Of course, you always nail it. Was Erica going to speak as well? I think I have her down as, I just wanted, if she is on, she certainly has the floor. If not, I will ask. Thank you. Thank you, David. Thank you, Sandy. Very important. Gosh, I can picture a compost place at that bridges and tunnel space right next to that hopefully closed street, if not someplace else nearby. Sandy, what can the committee do to give wings to your presentation?
We are hoping you might be able to do a resolution in support, or at least a letter of support. We have put together a letter that we're asking our elected officials to sign on to, but a resolution would be fantastic. It would really give support to what we're doing.
Okay, we're going to open it up. I can't, as you know, make a resolution. Perhaps another committee member can, so I will open this up now before questions to the public, questions to the committee members. I think I see Mark Thompson waving a hand.
Sorry, I couldn't get my button fast. I'm happy to propose a resolution, but I think we'll have a conversation first. If people have comments.
Yes, we should. And thank you, Mark. So we'll definitely circle back with you if that's allowed to be said. So let's go to any other committee member questions at this point. And I'm sorry, Brendan, if you can help me see raised hands, and if there aren't any, then that's fine.
Yeah, I don't see any raised hands from committee members yet.
I'm raising my hand, sorry.
The old-fashioned way, Jeannie, like me, wave it.
It's accepted.
Sorry. Sandy, I have a question for you. The composting project, will it be similar to what we see now? Is it in partnership with the folks that do it at Stuytown? Or is this separate from, you know, what New York City had done earlier with the brown buckets?
It's basically, though, the Lower East Side Ecology is the one who sponsors it, that we'd be working with them. Great. And they have quite a bit of information. It would be for approximately 4 or 5 hours, 1 day a week. We would collect. We would always have to have community members there. And then we store it until they can come and pick it up. And we would work out a schedule with them. And actually, if we can let Leah speak, she may be able to address the questions even more thoroughly if that's appropriate.
Absolutely. She has the floor if she would like it.
Yeah, let me give her an opportunity to talk.
And it would be also interesting to see what has worked, since you obviously have that experience more to the south.
Okay, Leah should be unmuted now.
Hi, can folks hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Hi, sorry, can you repeat the question? I was just adjusting my
with other compost areas, what has worked? And I should add, what have the challenges been to get it done? To get space appropriated, I should say.
So the way things worked in the past with community hosted sites that were not processing the food scraps into compost on site was that they used the DSNY curbside composting program, to collect all the materials, and then the sanitation department would come and pick up on collection days. What we're gravitating towards now is Sanitation's partnering organization, such as the Lower East Side Ecology Center, is looking to pick these up. So here's where we see some benefits and also some challenges. In the past, I've heard some groups who are participating in this program say, sometimes the pickups were not as consistent as they wish they could have been. So with working with a partnering organization like us, we're a much smaller scale organization, that we would be able to coordinate directly with community groups to make sure that we pick up on a more on a consistent basis on when we would come into agreement with that. And for any type of community composting program, it's really more about, how much outreach and engagement you do with the local residents. So one park in particular that I'm thinking in terms of how to speak more on is right now I'm working with neighbors at Matthews Palmer's Park in Hell's Kitchen. They've started composting in November, and now it's it's February, so they've been composting for a couple of months now. And they were in this program in the past, and had rejoined it after we were able to support them into being able to start collecting again. And their model is a little bit more like you have the folks that come and drop off are also looking at the bins, and they have like a group of 12, I think like 12 to 20 volunteers that are, able to, they can organize if, there's any issues that they see at the park, like for example, someone leaving a bag out, or maybe putting in some things that we might not want to compost that we consider contaminants. So they organize by getting their participants to also look after the compost drop off. So I hope that somehow answered your question.
Thank you very much. Very helpful. And it was definitely helpful. Any other committee questions or comments?
I see that Marty has his hand raised.
Yeah, having been on this committee for close to 30 years, been chair for a couple of years back in the 90s, the issue with St. Vartan's and the DOT area just north of it on First Avenue. We've approached DOT several times for that space. They did quote the issues in regards to the infrastructure, but also that the rodent infestation, which has been endless, and they put rodent killing facilities in there, either poison or traps and whatever, would make that spot very inconvenient for any other usage. The fact that there's rodents that are very much in the area, composting has to be put in a place that is as far away from that as possible. So in any letter that's being sent to the DOT, those issues have to be taken into consideration.
Well, thank you. And I know that wasn't, really meant to be part of Sandy's presentation, but it is important to have that information. I still like to see if there is some common rodent-free ground to be with on bridges and tunnels. But thank you. I mean, do you see it's, Marty, as it's worth even trying to move the needle?
We could always try. Yeah,
But-
one of the things that this committee has done over the years was work on issues for years and years and years, such as the fence around Stuyvesant Park, which was a 20-some-odd year venture. Getting the 54th Street Recreation Center rebuilt bit by bit, which was another 15, 20-year issue. We try, and we keep at it, and eventually we get things done. The Asser Levy was another project that took an endless time to get the park in front of it and get the recreation center itself redone. Yes, we should try. And eventually we may come across some city official who says, oh yeah, that's a good idea.
Well, and I'd love to be able to follow up, thank you, with Spencer Williams, who will be joining us soon, about the, obviously, the opportunity to have a czar of the public realm to be able to coordinate all the different agencies who lay claim to jurisdiction.
Having these issues as in the budget priorities, and having a strong voice in the production of the budget priorities, so it gets closer to the top rather than in the realm of the 20th or 24th priority, would help.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I don't see any more committee member questions, although we can open it up if you do. Any members of the public who would like to express support or other comments about this?
I see a hand raised from Ann Seldman, who's not a member of this committee, but a member of the board.
Great. Ann, you have the floor.
Let me give her, whoops.
Thanks for joining us, Ann.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm happy to be here. It's saying I'm muted, but I think I'm not. Anyway, I thank you very much for covering this topic. It's, as you know, is something that I really care about. I was just wondering if anybody on particularly on 36th Street, if anybody has checked in with the NYPD on this, because my sense of just having walked by or down that block a few times is that they will just like park and hang out there. It's a place, a sort of non, if they're kind of on a shift but not on a call.
Yeah, I see Sandy raising her hand. Sorry to cut in, Ann, but we may have an answer on that from Sandy.
We went to Molly Hollister, who's also part of AllKB, and I went to the Build the Block and mentioned that we were interested in this street as an open street. And we did get some pretty positive response, I think, from our local police representation. So, and in a way, it makes it maybe safer. But yeah, they did seem to have a positive view of doing this.
Good.
And anything else, Ann? Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Sandy.
Erica is here now. If she wanted to say a few words.
Absolutely. Erica, you want to pick up on the discussions either on St. Martin or the closed street?
Just that I'm so grateful to you all for your support for it. It's going to be hugely, it's going to make a huge difference for the families who bike and to play on that blacktop with bouncy balls. I mean, anything that the majority of how that space is used will have to shift somewhere. And as you all know, we don't have a lot of open space in our neighborhood. And so being able to access that road will just entirely change what the families are able to do. Not to mention, some of the other adults in the neighborhood who use that blacktop for things like pickleball and whatnot. So anything that we can do at PS 116, the families are heavily invested in this, as I know PS 281 is as well. And then also, just as an aside to that, there's still the question in terms of open spaces about that playground, that the garden in front of the preschool, in the playground, is still something that we're hopeful will be able to be accessed more by the community.
Thank you very much. And we do have a New York City Parks presentation tonight, so maybe that's something that we can address if during the Q&A. It's something we can address if we want to during the Q&A, and I'll make sure that that is raised. On a personal note, not that that matters, but it does to me. I have 3 children. All 3 of them learned to ride a bike, a very important life skill, on the blacktop at St. Martin's. So I get it.
Seriously, I mean, absolutely, as did my kids.
It's important. Okay, any other public comments or questions on this subject before we move on to a related matter?
I do see that David Saul has his hand raised.
Yeah, I just need to ask a question, and if it's the wrong time, just let me know. Marty brought up something that's somewhat alarming, in that if there's a rat infestation right next to, in that green space right across from St. Martin's Park, then is that something that CB6 should be addressing, and can we address that, and should that be addressed now? Because there's certainly a lot of like very large rodents that we certainly see around the area.
Good question, Mark, because I know that resolution is popping around in your skull. Is that something that you have any thought on? How you would potentially bring that up in a resolution if you could?
Well, having had professional experience in rat abatement, we'll leave it at that because it's really gross. It can be done. You're never going to get rid of them. They're probably coming through the tunnel, but we can ask about that. But there are ways to attack it. You just have to really try hard. So that should be definitely mentioned in the resolution. There's probably other things too. I don't quite know what, people, today or even later on may have ideas of things that need to be paid attention, like,
Hey, Michael, I'm depositing. Oops.
Hi, Ann.
You have the floor officially, Ann. You're supposed to get the chair's permission to take the floor. You know that. You have the floor.
And take the trash out. No, but yeah, so we should mention the rats in the resolution, and also with the office, we should talk about getting the rat czar from the city to help us with that and put some pressure on that. And then we'll see if Ann can help us too.
Happy to help.
Okay.
Thank you, Ann. If there's nothing else, I believe we circle back to Mark Thompson for potential motion here.
Oh, yeah, I'd like to move that we support the idea of closing off the street with all the related issues to be raised in the resolution.
Woohoo!
I second.
Yes, seconded by Marty. Thank you both. We can do the vote now. I should say, Brendan, is that something that you Bigfoot us on, or is that something we should be doing?
I will conduct the vote.
All right.
When your name is called, please say whether you are in favor, opposed, abstain, or abstain for cause. Kevin O'Keefe.
I am in favor.
Jean D'Onofrio. Was that an in favor?
Yes, in favor.
Okay. Marty Barrett.
Favor.
Matt Bondi.
In favor.
Anton Malner.
In favor.
Raj Nayar.
In favor.
Reshma Patel.
In favor.
Mark Thompson.
In favor.
Gary Papush.
In favor.
And Dean Stephanidis.
In favor.
With 10 in favor, no opposed, no abstentions, and no abstentions for cause, the resolution passes.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. It's always
Thank you.
good to hear from you. Thank you. Let's move on. Spencer Williams. You might want to stick around for those that were thinking of jumping off, because Spencer Williams of the Municipal Art Society is up next. Now, although founded to beautify New York with public art, the organization did expand its mission to include the city's buildings, streetscapes, and public spaces with the aim of bringing the voice of the public into the debates that impact our lives as New Yorkers. Because I'm a history buff, here's a fun fact. The Municipal Art Society was founded on March 12th, 1893. I know that date. Coincidentally, the exact same day one Senda Berenson organized and officiated what's considered the first ever women's basketball game. Anyway, Spencer, take it away. You have the floor for 5 minutes.
Wonderful. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for inviting me so much. My name is Spencer Williams. I'm the Director of Advocacy at Municipal Art Society, and really excited to share with you some work from our Fight for Light campaign, which is done primarily with us in partnership with New Yorkers for Parks, a couple other organizations in the city that have joined our coalition. It's really predicated on the idea that access to sunlight is a critical element of the built environment. A couple of years back, as an organization, we did a bunch of work about accidental skyline, looking at some of the issues in the sky, particularly around super tall towers and other sort of unintended consequences of growth. This is sort of the flip side of that, of really making sure that city dwellers have access to sun within a close walk, which, having access to open space is a critical part of that. And really thinking about the role of the public realm as the real strong access to sunlight that people throughout the city have, whether that's on the waterfront and parks and playgrounds, knowing that roughly 40% of New York City's lands are comprised of streets, sidewalks, plazas. There's a lot of opportunities for space that's sort of underutilized, and oftentimes it's mismanaged or really misunderstood about who's responsible for maintaining it, upkeeping it. And I think there are a lot of really opportunities that we need to be mindful of, both to preserve those spaces that exist as really critical access points to sunlight, to gather, to do all kinds of things. We've certainly seen that over this last year. So our initial report that called for a public realm director was released in October of 2019. And in the last year, we've really seen the sort of role of public open space take on all kinds of needs. We've seen performances, we've seen people playing, protesting, and in neighborhoods that are short on park space, the sort of demand and use for streets, sidewalks, stoops has really, really increased. And we need to find strategies to make sure that these types of spaces, these types of opportunities where people can safely gather, can celebrate birthdays, can celebrate their community, can come together as a block, are really vital and thriving. And so we've released a policy brief that calls for sort of this public realm director role, with the idea that there are a couple of roles and responsibilities and case studies from other cities that we really looked at to say, for a city the size of New York, it's really remarkable that we don't have a single position that's really responsible for coordinating against all of these different agencies and thinking about what would really make the management of those spaces successful. And so when we look at sort of who governs the public realm now, it's a whole mismatch of different agencies. Oftentimes, you might even come into a situation in which you find that a piece or a parcel of land is owned by one particular agency, but managed through some management agreement by, a second or third agency. This is further complicated by the fact that the public realm, to most people, when they're walking around, it's just open space. And so it's really a complicated network. And so something as simple as a playground could actually be Department of Education because it's jointly operated. And so there are all these complicated use relationships, and there's no one really thinking about how to manage these spaces. A good example is open streets have been really phenomenal. Department of Transportation has really uplifted a really rapid permitting program to uplift, miles and miles of these facilities across the city. It's great to see Berry Street uplifted as an example. We worked this summer with some youth at the Brooklyn Youth Sports Club to really walk around that neighborhood and talk to neighbors and learn about their neighborhood as was a place of social gathering. But whether it's private uses in the public realm, whether it's issues around maintenance, sort of rat problems that you spoke to, sanitation, as more and more folks are sort of using the streets for commerce and eating. There are all these kind of new issues that we need to manage better. And so that all is underscored by the fact that we have sort of an inequitable distribution of open space. Like not every neighborhood is starting from the same place. There are inadequate protections for the public realm. Oftentimes when development happens, sort of shadow impacts and other things are sort of overstated and underplanned for. A good example is we'll see, well, there are shadow impacts in the wintertime, but it's the winter and no one's really using the space. And so what happens then when there's a pandemic and everyone wants to be outside because it's a little bit warmer outside in the sun? And that difference of like 10 or 15 degrees that you might get from feeling the sun on your face is really going to make a difference between you being outside or not. And so I think we need to not be short-sighted and really valuing these resources. And we need to set goals to really make sure that sunlight access is a part of our city as it grows and changes. And so we've outlined a couple of key roles and responsibilities for this position, really starting with management and coordination. I think from the sidewalk to the city, there's a real big gap here in terms of inventorying the agencies that work across the public realm, supporting budget actions, and also convening something that we'd call a public realm cabinet that would include the heads of all of those agencies and departments to really work to streamline the budgeting process, but also look for opportunities, because they're definitely, when in speaking to other stakeholders, we've heard situations in which Department of Transportation has come in and torn up the street, and then someone else has come in and torn up the sidewalk, and then someone else has come in and replanted trees, and it's been done in this uncoordinated way that has disrupted a neighborhood business because they've had trucks and facilities and workers in front of their street for 3 years, instead of that being a coordinated effort that could have sort of taken advantage of all of those different work orders to really create a place that functions and works. And we need that advising on the capital budget. Certainly, community boards know this. I think you all are in a situation in which you're doing an annual sort of budget ask for some capital, some programming. We really need a long-term capital plan that can address our open space needs, and then real strong strategies to achieve those strategies. With that said, we really do need a statement of citywide needs in public realm. There's a lot that happens through the community district statement of needs, but we need that to be really taken into the context of what are some of the vulnerabilities that exist in terms of target populations, youth. How are we making sure that our public realm is meeting the needs across different neighborhoods, and really thinking about which areas require special protections. And so there are going to be certain parks that serve a gathering purpose throughout the year, that if it's the only open space that you have in your neighborhood, there should probably be some special protections and considerations around that space, especially if there's no real viable strategy to acquire, maintain, and develop additional open space. So we really need to take advantage of that. We want there to be a sunlight strategic plan that the public realm plan would sort of advance as well, to really say that across parks, across transportation, here's how we're going to strategically advance access to open space. This role in this position is in a position to do that, as well as thinking about sunlight rating systems for buildings, changes to environmental review, and also other changes to rules, regulations, and design guidelines to ensure that the public realm is really working. So that could be everything from like where trees placed to the orientation of buildings. The public realm director should be really thinking about that interface between the public realm and the private realm. Because right now, when that happens, when the planning effort happens, we have streets thinking about streets, we have parks thinking about parks, we have DCP or planning thinking about the buildings, but no one's really thinking about that interface. Another piece is sort of monitoring and review. And so I think this is about tracking public realm commitments, advising on mayor discretionary projects, but also problem solving. Right now, if you call 311, it can be really hard. Like, a good example would be for a tree. Like, whose tree is this? Who's responsible for fixing this tree? This position should be responsive to those kind of community concerns about transparency and accountability, to be able to sort of navigate amongst city government to make sure that those systems are working, and that things can be done efficiently to save some money. Lastly, I think permitting and programming is really important. There are increasingly conflicts in the use of space. You know, we've had schools reach out for use to expand the classroom into the street for safe space. There's open culture. So we're about to start seeing performances in spaces. There's open businesses. So we're doing all of these different things. And I think this part is, you know, having a sort of public realm diversity commission that can think about all of the different uses of public space, including protest, including gathering, including commerce, because there are different concerns and different protections for those different uses, some constitutional. And so, you know, we're really calling for this public champion for the public realm, and recognizing that they need to be able to be situated with other elected officials and agencies to have that trust. They need to have a community-centered focus. And so having those touch points of the advisory committee, and being able to sort of be at the direction and accountability to both council and the mayor is really important. They'll need to get a lot of support from aligned professional interests to make sure that the management of those spaces, the bids, are on board. And they'll also need a really highly skilled support staff to deal with some of the things like legal issues in terms of management agreements between sort of parks and streets, to really think about how to make the most of streamlining city government. And also a meaningful budget to really plan for, invest in, and steward the public realm beyond our parks, beyond our other open spaces, to make sure that there's sort of line items, maintenance budgets that can really respond to the needs that are coming around. And so what we've proposed in our brief is that this would be a position or an office that would sit in the mayor's office. So it could either be a mayoral office, a deputy mayor, but would need to have that sort of role and position in order to impact the city budget, as well as to sort of have that cross-agency tie. And so that's also another reason why the sort of advisory committees and the capital cabinet are really important as well, to make sure that that position can function both internally and externally to the mayor's office, and also take advantage of that sort of concentration of power. One of the things that's sort of inherent is that, you know, the strength of this position is also tied to the strength of a mayor and the mayor's interest in really investing in the public realm. And so, you know, relative to some other strategies of like creating an additional department that might sit outside the mayor's office, the sort of benefits outweigh the sort of potential risk that a future mayor may not take the public realm seriously, especially if they're sort of bolstered by a city of advocates, community boards that are sort of pushing for that position to be successful. And so I would say that lastly, if you want to find out more, there's a lot more in both the policy brief and in the report called Bright Ideas that came out before. You You can find that on our website at mas.org/FFL. And to sign up for future engagement opportunities. As was mentioned earlier, other community boards have signed some resolutions and letters in support for this position, whether that's as part of their sort of budget priorities for this past year, or sort of thinking about addressing some of the systemic needs around lack of investment in new open space or management issues of existing open space that this position could begin to address. I will also share that we have another policy brief that will be coming out in the next couple of weeks or months that's more on the development and regulation side, and we'd be happy to come back and sort of share that information with you all as well when that time comes. So with that, that's all I have, and happy to take questions from the audience.
Hey, thank you very much, Spencer. And I know you did this on somewhat short notice, so we gratefully appreciate the presentation and all the information. I believe the Borough President's Office has expressed their support for this. I know Community Board 5. Could you mention any others that you have that have formally expressed support?
We've given a presentation to Community Board 12, but in Manhattan, but they have not yet signed a resolution. We're going to follow up and see if that's the case. I think the other part of this is as we ramp up the next policy brief, we'll sort of have a full Fight for Light agenda and policy platform. And so our outreach will increase over the coming months. And so I think we'll be looking for opportunities to give more presentations to both community boards, but borough boards and small neighborhood groups as well, to potentially sign on to this call for a public realm director.
Thank you. I'll open it up for any, we'll start with committee members, but you can raise your hand if you're public as well, and we'll start with any committee members raised hands. Do not see any. I mean, I do. Jeannie, thank you. You have the floor.
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation. Very, very interesting and informative. So how close are you? How far away are you into really like solidifying this position with the mayor's office?
So there are a couple of pieces. One, I think, is solidifying the idea that this position is needed. I think what we've seen and is referenced in the report is there have been similar calls for an office of pedestrian, an office of active transportation. Councilmember Rivera had introduced or co-sponsored both of those pieces of legislation. And so the sort of steps that are needed would be for a council member or the public advocate to introduce legislation that would call for the creation of this office. The sort of implementation of that office then would have some flexibility in terms of how it could be sort of staffed and resourced, whether it would be sort of an independent office that would have a director. That director could also be a deputy mayor in the future. And so I think the next step for us is to build sort of the public momentum for this position and the need, and then to begin to find council members that are supportive of introducing that legislation to call for this office. And so when community boards put pressure on and sign on and support to this idea, those steps are really helpful to get the sort of eye and ear of council to be responsive, because ultimately they would be responsible for creating this office.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Marty Barrett, you have your hand raised. Go ahead.
Yeah, the CAU doesn't have any kind of jurisdiction over what you're looking for? The community activities unit of the mayor's office.
They have some jurisdiction, but it's not holistic, right? There are certainly more aspects of the public realm than community activities. The mayor's office has a bunch of scattered programs as well, and so there's a group the SCORE group, for example, in the mayor's office is a group of folks that drive around in those three-wheeled vehicles that, sort of survey the city on a monthly basis and are helping to respond to 311 calls and streamline 311 tickets to the responsible agencies. That's something that could be subsumed by this new Office of the Public Realm to really centralize and concentrate some of those disparate pieces that are being taken on by either mayoral sort of initiatives or functions within individual departments. There still continues to lack that sort of oversight, coordination, planning, budgetary role that this director would subsume and feel the need of.
Thank you. I believe Anne has her hand raised.
I do. I just want to thank you from this. As always, MAS is just like, you guys are always doing super smart stuff. And so I really wanted to thank you for that. I did not hear, as one of the agencies involved, city planning. And I'm just thinking about, the fight for light that has been going on with the Brooklyn Botanic Garden and all the work that's been done to protect the light there. And so obviously city planning and zoning has a big role in that. And I'm just wondering kind of how you're folding that in.
It's a great question. So the director of the public realm is sort of one pillar of the Fight for Light platform. There will be sort of a development framework of sort of how to integrate sunlight into the development of the city that will be coming out in the coming weeks. And, we are partners with Brooklyn Botanic Garden. We, earlier on Monday, we released a press statement in regards to the certification of that project. That project has been in the news for the last couple of months. The mayor, for example, on Brian Lair, had indicated sort of an opportunity for that project to revisit its sort of scope and program because of the impacts both on Brooklyn Botanic Garden, but also Jackie Robinson Playground. And that's something that I think we'll be tracking both as a coalition, as an organization, to ensure that sort of comments around protecting the sunlight are part of that land use review.
Sandy McKee, you have the floor.
I wondered how this position might interact with some of the other agencies. I'm lowering my hand. For instance, we have the MTA. They're telling us we can't use this space. Would this give us more of an advocate to try and utilize some of those things? And we're also trying to use space under the FDR, and we come up with, it's state, it's not city. So could this position really give us some power to deal with those other agencies?
As an advocate, yes. I think as a sort of the structural limitations of what a city agency can move the state to do, and certainly there's the city-state politics that also complicate that relationship. But there are a number of really key pieces of infrastructure in the city where we have these conflicts. And so when we look at something like the redesign of the park blocks in the sort of 40s and 50s of Park Avenue, the sort of retunneling and resurfacing of that street, we have sort of, a state project. We have a multitude of ownership and operation from the surrounding buildings that face onto that have different levels of standards in terms of their upkeep and programming of that space. It's a really complicated mess between, who operates the streets, who operates the sort of parklets, what's happening underneath the street surface as well. A director of the public realm could really, I think, help with those kind of complicated long-range projects that, that project has the opportunity to rethink what will happen in that part of Midtown for the next 50 years. There isn't really a sort of city-led process. It's really falling to advocates within Midtown sort of holding that conversation. And I think that sort of a city agency could of this type could really support a project like that.
Thank you. Ideally, what are you looking for from this Environment and Parks Committee?
A resolution in support is certainly a great option. I think looking forward, as additional council members get involved and engaged, I think there will be multiple opportunities to support this call. I think if there are additional roles or responsibilities that you all sort of see fit that you would also want to comment on that are not sort of addressed, if we're missing sort of a key function, we'd want to know about that in terms of what roles that you all see are missing. And then I think linking it up to the budget conversation is also really critical in the ways that you all have described in the previous discussion. You know, we saw a real big hit to our parks in the last year, and we've seen a lot of community groups stepping up, whether that's to move the bollards on the open streets and maintain those spaces. It's going to continue to take a lot of sort of community partnership to maintain these critical spaces. And so to the degree that you all are also doing a lot of public space management as sort of neighbors and advocates and stewards of these spaces that you're trying to create, I think thinking about the kind of resources that you all need as well as part of that can be also really helpful, because that sort of scale difference of what's happening on the ground and what the citywide need is can be really helpful to both solidify your needs as a community board and sort of some of the challenges that you face, and really link that to the sort of citywide needs, because certainly your needs in CB6 are going to be, you know, slightly different than where I'm sitting in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn. So, but there's a lot of similarities as well.
Thank you. So I'll leave that up to the committee on, you know, whether they want, you know, anybody wants any movement today. What I do want to do is make sure that we keep this discussion at the bare minimum as part of our dialogue going forward. I think this is an important thing to have. And as if I can echo Jeannie, certainly really smart ideas are coming out of the Municipal Art Society. Really like your materials because they're really laser focused on what things that need to be done. So it's a pleasure to intersect with you. And I will leave it up to any committee members on any potential actions that need to be taken in a more shorter term.
I see that Marty has raised his hand.
Marty?
Yeah, Spencer, you know, the things that you said are really terrific. You did mention that you're fleshing out a broader plan. I think for us to develop a resolution that would be meaningful, we should wait for the broader plan to be on paper, so that we could then emulate that and come across with a resolution that makes a lot of sense. But it's certainly something. Public space is something this committee has always been looking at. You know, the pops in our area have been spaces that we've long looked at. Many years ago, for instance, when the waterfront south of 23rd Street was a broken concrete parking lot that was falling into the East River, we focused on making it a park. I'm president of the Stuyvesant Cove Park Association. I was there from the beginning of that. We raised $8 million to develop the park. But certainly it's something that this committee would love to participate in at some point.
Absolutely. And we will keep it tabled and on board unless there's any other discussion on this. Very important. Just briefly, if you can just touch on one of the cities. I know what is Boston and Paris and Los Angeles have these. You know, in a nutshell, how's that working out?
I think Paris in particular, they've come out with their 15-minute city idea, sort of organizing principle that's sort of saying, they want to develop their city in a way in which everyone is within a 15-minute walk to an open space, to transit, a whole host of other things. London is probably the most substantial example. They have a slightly different development scenario in there. They have a lot more sort of historic legal protections for private sunlight access. They have their sort of ancient lights. And so projects in London have to go through a sort of rigorous sunlight analysis before they're built. And so those projects take quite a bit of time and involve quite a bit of analysis before the sort of skyline is really impacting their urban areas, as well as their lower scale, lower density areas. But I would say working out pretty well. And even in a place like Los Angeles, we were able to have a conversation earlier last year with Christopher Hawthorne, who's in that position, and in terms of that office has really been influential in setting sort of the advocacy agenda and sort of the importance for sort of the cultural placemaking and some of the sort of what those public spaces have meant to LA. And so I think in terms of supporting a mayoral agenda that often comes with bucks, with real dollars and real sort of administration initiative, I think that we've seen where aligned those positions to really be able to make meaningful progress, whether that's for like cultural uses or in particular sort of protection of spaces.
Great.
That's the power of the sort of mayoral alignment.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Again, keep up the fight for light. A guy that has helped provide a lot of light for this city is Wesley Hamilton. He is up next on the agenda with a New York City Parks report.
Hey, good evening, everyone. I hope can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Hope so. Sounds good. All right, good.
So you're good.
Apologize. I'm again doing this from my phone and I have my computer. So if it looks like I'm not looking at you, I'll try to situate you very close. I don't have a lot of updates, but I'll try to give you a few specifically for, well, first of all, let me mention, should say that all of our crews are engaged currently right now in snow removal. Everyone knows that we got about 24 inches of snow, so we're all pretty exhausted and tired, and we're working hard. So if we haven't got to your local area yet, we will be there soon. We are prioritizing all of our staff and hitting or removing snow based on priorities. So trying to get the schools ready, any of our what we call our joint operated playgrounds that's adjacent to schools, and our public transportation hubs tend to be our highest of priorities just because of foot traffic. And then we'll start moving out to some of our smaller parks and then a lot of our playgrounds. So we will be there as soon as possible, and all of our crews are engaged currently doing that. So be patient with us, but if you do see something that looks hazardous or concerned, please reach out to us, and we'll try to get there as soon as we can. With that being said, just a few updates with our capital projects. Basically, we've got a few projects that are what we call under procurement. Means is they've completed their design stage, and then we're trying to purchase them. And then OMB is has sometimes waits due to COVID. They've been kind of holding off on some of releasing all of that until they're sure that they have enough funds to be able to cover it, and because of some unknown expenses due to COVID. And so those sites would be Bellevue, which is completed design and awaiting OMB release for procurement, and Tudor Grove Mary O'Connor Park have completed their designs and also waiting on OMB procurement. But that would be the next phase, is moving on to procurement for those sites. St. Barton's is currently still in design phase. That is nearing the end of that phase, and then that'll fall into that category of waiting for procurement. Glick Park is currently in design phase at this point, at this time, and DAG is in procurement. I don't believe OMB has held that DAG for procurement up, because that is actual was put up for procurement several years ago, and then or a year or two ago, and we didn't get the prices that we hoped for, so we put it back out to bid. So that's a little different story with DAG. And then some updates with some of our synthetic field replacement. We're anticipating Robert Moses and Peters Field, what we call our multi-purpose play area. Our asphalt softball areas are going to be converted into synthetic turf at those two locations, and we anticipate that in the spring. So that's a few of the capital projects updates. I'm sure I probably didn't hit them all. I'm sure people have some questions, and I'm happy to take any questions if anybody has.
Great, and I'll take this opportunity too, because St. Martin's, I see that Sandy McKee is still on here. I believe Erica Rand Silverman is still on to certainly address any questions you have about St. Martin. I just have a quick question about Peters Field, because I did have some people in the community did ask, and I know we've talked about basketball hoops and facilities before, that when the spring comes back and COVID is gone, do you know if there's any plans, budgetary or otherwise, to put up real more net-friendly basketball hoops at Peters Field? Because I know that will certainly come up once everybody is back and healthy.
I'm not aware of any, but I'll certainly make a note of it and look into it for you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Anybody, and I don't know if Sandy, you have any questions about for instance, the garden. And if not, I guess I'll ask it. The garden that is on First Avenue as part of St. Martin, I believe that is still being looked into as possibly more hours for the general public. And Sandy, I see you there if you want to add on to that request.
Yes, I know we've asked our Partnership for Parks representative what's happening. Do you have any update, Wes, about if that would be open more?
I don't have any updates. We are looking into it again, as we mentioned earlier. We are considering that, and I am also. We're beginning to talk with Ashley as well, our volunteer coordinator. So we are looking into it. No new updates on it, but we'll keep you posted.
Any timeline?
I don't have one at this time. No, I'm sorry, but again, as soon as I know something, we'll let you know.
One other small, it's a bit unrelated, and I know David probably has a follow-up, but there's a sinkhole in Glick Park. Do you know when that might be addressed?
Well, Glick Park doesn't actually have a sinkhole. It has some structure underneath, but there is an area that we have closed off. But just to clarify, there's nothing that has begun sinking at this point in time. But we do have an area cautioned off, and that area is included in the design and when that goes forward. So when that project does go to protrusion, we're saying that right? Once that begins, that will be corrected in that project. So again, as I mentioned earlier, Glick is in the design phase, and typically we have what we call our capital parks. If you go to our parks website, we have what's called a capital tracker, and it can kind of explain ballpark how long each project takes, and that's give or take some. And then of course, COVID has complicated that even more, as I mentioned with some of the O&B projects. But for the most part, once something goes through design and it goes through legal and then it goes through procurement, that in its process may take a year, two, or up to a year and a half. And then you go into the construction phase, which may take anywhere from a year to 2 years. But that condition at Glick will be addressed in that project once it happens.
Do you have any advice for locating our composting within St. Martin's?
Well, I'm familiar with several different composting things. There's so many different ways of composting, and I'm sorry, I've dealt with everything from large scale to small scale. So I would need to know a little bit more details, but I would be happy to work with you and the volunteers. And as many of you may know, I'm a horticulturist, I guess, really by trade, and a gardener for many of my years in Parks Department. So not the final word in horticulture. I've learned a lot from anybody, you know, even though I've been doing it my career, somebody's walked off the street and showed me something that taught me something. But nevertheless, I'll be happy to share what I know. But I think probably when we deal and talk more individually with our volunteer coordinator, I'd be happy to work with your group and to try to come up with some ideas and some solutions to that, because there's so many different ways that we've been doing composting, both from with sanitation or just with individual volunteer groups. So we'll look at it in detail, and I'll be happy to work with you guys.
Great, we'll reach out to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Wes. Sandy, can I?
Thank you.
Am I allowed to jump in at this point? Just
Go ahead, David. I didn't realize you're on. Go ahead, David.
No, thank you, Kevin. So Wes, I just a couple quick things. One is there a particular objection to opening the garden in St. Martin's Park? Because there are no hours to the public at this point, with the exception of the kids that are at the school.
Well, again, at this point in time, I'm not going to really go into any objections or anything. As I mentioned earlier, we're looking into it. So it would be too premature to come up with anything further than that at this point in time.
Okay. Yeah, it's just, I know it's something that's been sitting out there for a while, so we appreciate it, Wes. We appreciate you looking into that. The other,
I understand your patience. We are aware of it, and we do note it, and we are looking into it, and I appreciate your patience with that matter. But
thank you. So then the other thought on that is, I believe that Erica had to jump off. I know that the Little Library is kind of a pet project that she's leading. I believe that from Ashley's note at the Parks Department that we will be able to do something with that. Are there certain steps that we need to take in working with you, Wes, to make sure that we do it the right way in the right place? And do we need to wait until after the park has gone through the renovation before we should even consider that as a possibility?
Well, multiple questions there, but yes, there are some things that I'll have to look over, and I've done a few of the little libraries. I think they're great, but with anything that we install with our parks, we do have some standards, and we have mostly concerns with safety. And then so I need to look at that and have some involvement in that. I'll need to know what all you're looking to do and how you're looking to do it. In most of the cases that we've purchased them, which is good, because then we have basically drawings and blueprints, basically loosely, of what we're installing. But we're open to other ways. But yes, we'll be involved with that. And again, through that, we'll be coordinating that through our volunteer coordinator, and I'll also be working with you guys on that. Location is another thing. So yes, there is some sections of the park, and the park is divided up into what's going under, you know, the playground is separate from the MPPA, and that does have some consideration, you know, as to when you want to install it, but not necessarily. So we'll sit down and we'll figure out all the details of that, probably better as a group with the volunteer coordinator.
So is that something that we should just continue to work with Ashley and then with you on?
Yes.
That's the right path? Okay.
Look forward to working with you guys on that.
Okay, that's great. No, that'll be wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, if there are no other questions, I have a quick one, because sometimes it's the little things. Because at the last meeting, Matt Bondi had brought up Sutton Place Park's little library. I wanted to just take a look at it. I did the other day. I walked up to it. There was an elderly lady there. I said, "Isn't it wonderful to have a little library here?" And she said, "Well, yes and no." I said, "Well, what's the no?" And she said, "Someone stole the shelf. There's a shelf so that the books can be, you know, like a normal bookcase on 2 levels. And now they're just piled on top of each other." She said, "Is there anything anybody can do?" And I said, "Well, I can try." They would like their ledge put back. I said, "Do you know what happened to it?" She said, "I think someone stole it." And so anything you could do to help, not just her out, but the community. I don't know if, Matt, you have any feelings on that, but hated to hear her complaint.
Well, no, I just want to thank you for coming to take a look at it. You know, it's a nice free little library, and I think that people receive it very well. But you know, the kids, so there'll be kids, they run around. The other day, it was snowing very hard, and I saw children playing with it and looking inside. They're intrigued by it, you know, and it'll happen. But I guess you just have to stay vigilant. And you know, the Sutton Parks Conservancy people are very good at maintaining the park there. And you know, I don't know what to do about a missing shelf, short of maybe asking somebody to make one, you know, for it. But I'll take a look and I'll
measure it. So maybe that's what it takes, unless Wesley has another suggestion, because, you know, it's just a piece of wood, right? But it could make a big difference. I don't want to spend an hour on this, but I did think it was worth mentioning.
We'll make a note of that as well, too. Thank you.
Thank you. That was last Wednesday, I believe. Okay, I will waive. I know we're going on to an hour and a half, so I will waive for that and other reasons. The chair report. Any old or new business? Anyone?
Actually, Kevin, you know, not mean to go back to an earlier topic, but did we determine who's writing the one resolution?
Yes, that would be, well, no, we didn't. We didn't. Mark made the motion. Wonderful. Who wants to be the wordsmith on the resolution for the presentation that Alliance for Kips Bay presented? Any volunteers?
I don't think that anybody who is on Kips Bay can actually write it, but if somebody like Sandy would like to give me a lot of ideas, I'll write it.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you.
Wait, did Sandy say yes or no? She's
there. Oh, Sandy. Oh, there she's there. You're muted, Sandy. You're muted, Sandy.
Absolutely.
Okay. You want to give me a bunch of stuff and just email it to me, and then I'll write one.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Love you. Thank you.
Great. Wonderful. Thank you, Brendan. I appreciate that. If there's not any old or new business to raise, I think we can, do I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Thank you very much. Seeing no further business, this meeting is adjourned at 8:24 p.m. Brendan will end the live stream, I believe, right?